Good evening. At the outset, we would like all of us chairpersons to thank 𝐤𝐢𝐜𝐶 and the organizing committee, especially Dr. Georgie Abraham, for giving us this opportunity and this awesome platform to chair a session that is also very unique. The session goes by the name Software for Kidney Pair Donation Transplantation by none other than the famous kidney transplant surgeon, Dr. Michael A. Rees, whose work in this field has started almost in the year 2000. What would be the inspiring factor definitely would be the sufferings of CKD patients not getting a kidney for transplantation. So now it's 23 years, a lot of refinement has definitely gone into the software. And today, we the thinkers, doers, and the visionaries, let's delve deep into this software program, and definitely this program will bring a phenomenal change in the lives of CKD patients awaiting a kidney transplant with an incompatible donor. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the organizers, and especially to Vivek Kute for the opportunity to come and speak with you today. I've been coming to India now for something like 7 or 8 years, advocating for kidney pair donation, and it's really heartening to see that this concept is gaining traction, and seems like this may be the year when we finally bring it to life. I'd like to convince you with my talk today that there's tremendous opportunity in India for kidney exchange. We've heard about ABO incompatible transplantation, and clearly it's working better and better and better. We've heard about HLA incompatible transplantation, that's working better. But probably more importantly, we've learned which cases not to do, and by learning which cases not to do, we sort of keep ourselves out of trouble. As a transplant surgeon, as transplant nephrologists taking care of our patients, there's nothing more disheartening than the loss of a living donor kidney transplant. We're fortunate in the United States that we do a lot of deceased donor kidney transplants, and somehow the loss of a deceased donor kidney doesn't hurt as bad as the loss of a living donor kidney transplant. Both are tragic events. But when you do an ABO incompatible transplant, and when you do this and you lose a kidney, it's tragic, and you wonder, well, maybe there's something else I could have done. And I would like to try to convince you that perhaps first, you just try not to do an incompatible transplant. That KPD, or kidney exchange, should be the first choice. And then there's these wonderful options if we can't find an alternative. So the way to make that happen is to have software that enables kidney exchange to take place. And Vivek Kute in Gujarat's a great example, where he's done now 500 kidney exchanges, and having software to help facilitate that is really what creates the pool to find those opportunities. And before I get into the detail of this, there's one final point I'd want to make to encourage the consideration of kidney exchange. While clearly ABO incompatible transplantation in Japan is now equal to compatible transplantation, there's one way in which it's not compatible, and that is that when the ABO incompatible transplantation takes place, you do one kidney transplant. The beauty of kidney exchange is that by that pair participating in a kidney exchange, they might be able to help an HLA incompatible pair, and 2 transplants at a minimum could take place. So that's a way in which, by not participating in ABO incompatible transplant, that pair might help yet another pair achieve a kidney. So let's get into the meat now of my talk. I do have a couple of conflicts of interest. I'm the CEO of the Alliance for Paired Kidney Donation, and I've also started a company in the United States to try to help our healthcare payers help their clients get faster access to a kidney transplant through a company called Rejuvenate Healthcare. I ran up to my room and changed my talk after watching the ABO session today. I was moved by this talk by Dr. Ray that spoke about the cost, and you see the cost in the upper slide here of incompatible transplantation. And then he went on to talk about what we need to do if we want to try to use it in a low-resource country. We saw from Dr. Tanabe just now that he has been able to lower the amount of resources and immunosuppressions to try to achieve some of the things that Dr. Ray spoke about here. So we need a simple protocol. Kidney exchange takes no protocol, it's just a compatible kidney transplant. The complicated stuff is finding the match in the first place, and if you do it in the same transplant center, then as long as you're not doing too many of them at the same time, it's relatively easy to do. There's some coordination if you want to do it between transplant centers in the same city, and I think that's where India really needs to start, is by doing it locally and then maybe regionally before we start trying to do cross-state exchanges. We need low rejection rate. Compatible transplant gives you that. Low infection rate, compatible transplant gives you that. Good patient and graft survival. And of course, the affordability, kidney exchange is less expensive than trying to do either HLA incompatible or ABO incompatible transplantation. In the United States now, paired exchange transplants are making up more than 1,000 transplants. We do about 6,000 living donor kidney transplants. It's now making up about 20 to 25% of all the living donor kidney transplants performed on an annual basis in the United States. And if you add many of those are chains that start with a non-directed donor. If you add the number of paired exchanges and the non-directed donor at the beginning, it's something like 30% of all the transplants in the United States. If you look at those centers that do at least 5 kidney exchanges as part of what they do, then more than 30% of their overall living donor kidney transplants are achieved through kidney exchange. So what does this mean for India? Well, just in Delhi alone, it's my understanding that somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 kidney transplants are performed each year. And unfortunately in India, the deceased donor system has not yet matured. So almost all of those transplants, especially in the northern part of India, fortunately with the Mohan Foundation, deceased donor transplantation is improving in the southern part. But in the northern part, deceased donor transplantation still is not happening to the extent that we would all like. So most of those transplants are living donor kidney transplants, and just by employing paired exchange, we may be able to do an additional 500 kidney transplants per year just in the Delhi-wide area. So there's tremendous opportunity. Today I'd like to talk about how software can help enable this by putting in place the policies that we want embedded in the software so that it achieves the priorities and the allocation principles that you want. It also can help facilitate the communication between the transplant centers and make sure that everybody's behaving according to the principles that have been put in place. And it helps with logistical considerations like the cross-match, whether the donors travel, and I'll show you a little bit of how all that works. So a little bit of the oversight. The Alliance for Paired Kidney Donation is a 501c3 in the United States. That means it's an NGO, nonprofit organization. We now serve about 50 kidney transplant centers in the United States, and we're serving patients in 15 countries around the world. As we help to build out kidney exchange programs, it's good for those of you who haven't been exposed to this to think about, well, why do I need software in the first place? Well, the first time I ever tried doing kidney exchange was the year 2000, and I took 20 charts home, 10 recipient charts and 10 donor charts, and it took me 6 hours to try and figure out who matched who, and it was very complicated, and I didn't check every single possibility. It turns out that There was a number of, we only did two-way exchanges then, and I'll show you the mathematics behind how many possibilities there are. But just looking in this, you can see that in the row across the top, donor 1 can't give to recipient 1. That's why they're participating in kidney exchange. But every place you see an X is where a donor needs to be tested against a recipient to see whether compatibility exists. And if it does, then you can look for the possibility of an exchange. So with 100 donor and recipient pairs, you can see that the number of combinations that you have to look at goes up logarithmically according to the formula n times the quantity n minus 1 divided by 2. So when I had 10 pairs, that would be 10 times 10 minus 1, or 9, that's 90 divided by 2. There were 45 combinations if I was just going to do two-way exchanges. Now, if you add three-way exchanges and four-way exchanges, it gets even more complicated, and so the human mind really can't hold that all together. This is what the first 41 pairs look like in the Alliance for Paired Kidney Donation when we put all the pairs together. You can see it's really hard to figure out, well, which exchanges should I do if that's all the combinations where the donor of one pair matches with the recipient of another pair. You see the red dots are the ones that were fairly easy to match. The black dots had at least one match for their recipient, and the gray dots were those 99+% pairs that didn't match any of the pairs in the system. So once you figure out compatibility, then we have to think about, well, what's important to us when we try to match people? Well, in the United States, we think about waiting time. We think about trying to benefit children. We think about trying to give people who have a really good HLA match a kidney. We try to think about trying to help people that are very, very highly sensitized, give them priority access to a kidney. So we have different priorities, and I understand that in the allocation of deceased donor kidneys in India, it's the waiting time that's most important, but there are additional priorities. And so you need some way of scoring and giving points to those things so that you can not only think about the maximum number of transplants that you can achieve, but also the highest quality points that you can achieve. This is the APKD point system. You see it's got some of those pieces in there of trying to help very hard to match people, or people who've been waiting a long time, or children, for example. But let me give you a very practical example of why software can help you figure out how best to match people. I'm just going to show a simple example with just 8 pairs. So let's imagine that in these 8 pairs, the solution you see on the left-hand side matches all 8 pairs in 4 two-way exchanges, and the quality of those matches is worth 50 points cumulatively. On the right hand, you see an alternative solution in which only 6 of the patients receive a transplant through 3 two-way exchanges, but now it scores 60 points. So if I could just get a show of hands in the audience, who would pick the solution on the left-hand side that gets 4 people transplanted? And who in the audience would pick the one on the right side, which gets more of the quality points? Maybe it gets a child transplanted. Yeah? So the challenge is, what if we were, by choosing to do the one on the left, we were not doing a zero mismatched transplant for an EBV negative donor to a child that is likely to give them a much extended graft survival. So it's hard to see in the detail exactly what it is that you're missing, and that's where the computer can help us figure those things out. So there's lots of different ways to put paired exchanges together. Here's sort of an example of how the computer might do something. You see we have a blue pair up in the upper left-hand corner. That's Jim and Sally. We have a green pair, Mary and Bob, and we have a red pair, Fred and Laura. And the green pair can match with either the blue pair or the red pair, and that's defined because of the the ones and zeros, tells you about the compatibility. If you follow Mary down, you see if you see Mary the donor, the second one over who's green, you can see that she has a 1 with Sally and a 1 with Fred, so she can give her kidney to the blue and the red pair, whereas Bob matches Jimmy at the top and Laura and has 1, so there's 2 choices. And if you look to the right, you see the points that they score. So this is what it actually looks like when you add up those points. If the blue pair and the green pair exchange, it's worth 18 points, whereas if the green pair exchanges with the red pair, it's only worth 7.2 points. So the computer would then choose to do the exchange between the blue pair and the green pair because it has the highest point score, and overall it gets 2 people transplanted. So that's a simple way of thinking about it. But now I'd like to teach you a little bit about optimization, which it took me a long time to understand optimization rather than just trying to sort of rank order the scores. So 1 can give to 3 and 3 can give back to 1. The green and the blue pair can exchange. The green and the red pair can do an exchange. And the computer figures out that, well, I want to do the exchange between the green pair and the red pair, the green pair and the blue pair because it scores more points. So that seems like a reasonable thing to do. Well, it turns out that 1 can give to 7 and 7 can give back to 1, and that's worth 11.8 points. And it gets 4 people transplanted instead of 2, so optimization might suggest that instead of transplanting 2 people and getting the highest scoring two-way exchange in the whole system, maybe instead we should do 2 two-ways. Neither of them scores 18 points, but cumulatively it's worth 19 points, and that's the highest score of the solution within that entire pool. So again, this is a place where if you have a very large pool, you can imagine it might be useful to you to have software to help you figure that all out. The last thing is that if you think about 2 ways and 3 ways, it gets even more complicated. So here's a 3-way exchange, there's a 3-way exchange, there's a multi-way exchange and another 2-way exchange, and the software can help you ferret out all these non-overlapping exchanges to tell you that there's 18 possible transplants in these 41 pairs that you could do. So kidney exchange is hard for human minds to capture, but it's easy for computers to do, and that's why we need software. But imagine at your own center, if all you need to do is find these pairs, put it up into the system, and let the software then tell you what exchanges are possible, it just makes life much easier. Then you just have to do a compatible transplant, especially if you can do it at your own center and do a simple 2-way exchange, and you have the resources in the operating rooms and surgeons to be able to accomplish that. My sense is as India starts this journey, they should begin with doing things inside of one center and then trying to do things inside of centers in the same city and then within the same state. It gets a little more complicated if you move outside of the state structure. So how is it that the software can help us enforce the principles of what's valuable to us? Well, we want efficiency. That's one of the things we want. We don't want to just find out what's a possible match. We actually want to find exchanges that can turn into actual kidney transplants. So in my 20 years of doing kidney exchange, I've never seen the optimal solution ever work, right? Because you have to do the cross matches, or a donor gets pregnant, or something happens, and the optimal solution is never the solution that actually takes place. So you have to be able to do cross matches. We're talking about the possibility of putting something together in the Delhi-wide area. Maybe they'll do this having a centralized HLA lab where they keep all the samples, or maybe they'll ship either donor blood to the recipient center or recipient sera to the donor center to be able to do cross matches. And the software can help capture how all that's going to be shipped and sent and communicated. Here's an example of the software. And over on the right-hand side, you see it's got the test date that the cross-match was done, the sera date, where it was tested, who reported it, was it a flow cross-match, a CDC cross-match, what was the T cell result, the B cell result. It can even help keep track of how many samples you have in the freezer if you need to collect more blood, for example. One of the things that we've learned in doing kidney exchange is it's not just about the immunology. So of course, there's ABO incompatibility, there's HLA incompatibility, but we're beginning to understand that there are other types of incompatibility. If you have a very small spouse and a very big, a very small wife and a very big husband, then maybe there's a size mismatch, and you might not want to do a transplant under those circumstances. Maybe you've got a small child and a grandfather that wants to donate, so you might have an age mismatch. So there are other types of incompatibilities that aren't immunological incompatibilities, but certainly the caring physicians think about the size and the renal function, gender and weight differences, and those become important factors in matching. And so software can help you identify those preferences ahead of time and not put together matches that you wouldn't actually accept. One of the things that you'll be faced with is, how are you going to move the kidneys? Are you going to move them inside of the donor's body so that they just travel to the recipient center and donate their kidney at the recipient center? Or are you going to have them stay at the center with the incompatible recipient and then ship the kidney? And the software can help if you manage the logistics of doing that. Here's an example, a little hard to see, of how the software captures all the incompatible antigens along with their MFIs, and also has those non-immunological factors that the centers can pick. Donor travel is something that we talked about, whether the donor travels to the recipient center, the donor stays at their original center, and kidneys are shipped. To begin with, it's again local at the same center within one city, so you only have to drive kidneys. But you could imagine that software could help facilitate this. In the United States, it's routine now that we fly kidneys between Boston and Los Angeles, and we have the software is an integral part in helping to facilitate the communication, to have backup flights and taxis, and know where things are supposed to be delivered. So this is why it's important to have software to cover all of the different possibilities in making kidney exchange and to make it easy for us. So this is our logistics page that helps track what center things are happening at, who the surgeons are, who the coordinators are. We have to follow certain rules with our national regulatory body. Here in India, it can capture different types of information that might be needed to authorize a particular donor. So in summary, kidney exchange is now relatively easy to do when you have software that helps you find those matches. It's hard to do if you try to do it manually yourself. Kidney exchange is much easier to do than ABO incompatible transplantation in terms of the actual transplant itself, and the same with HLA. It's less expensive, although we've heard from Dr. Tanabe that he's really been able to bring down the cost of that, and hopefully that will work in a lower resource setting like India. I think it's important to realize that the law now allows kidney exchange. We were fortunate to meet with some of the government officials a couple of days before we came here to Kolkata to talk about how to do this. And they had no reservations with starting a kidney exchange program in Delhi, because the law allows for swaps. If they're near relatives, there won't be any problem with that. I think there are still some challenges with the law when a mom and a son can do it, but an uncle and a nephew can't do it. but they can still give each other a kidney directly. I think there's still some work to be done, but let's get started. Swaps are allowed with near relatives in India. And the exciting thing is that if this is started, it can help you increase the number of transplants that you're doing at your center by 20 to 30%. And with that, I'm finished and happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rees, for the enlightenment on the Allied for Pay donation. Quite challenging if we have to move from a center to a regional and then to a national level. A lot of ethical and legal issues that we'll have to take and look. It requires quite a lot of teamwork that we have to, but definitely swaps are being done in few centers that we definitely do, especially when they are immunologically incompatible. That has worked out quite well for swaps, that is between two pairs. The maximum that, but definitely there are states who are doing more. It's quite challenging to go out into a state and a national level, but it's definitely worth a try. I'm happy for questions to the House, if there's any.
With that, we would like to thank and felicitate our speaker and the chairpersons. Can I request Dr. 𝐿𝐼𝐜𝐜𝐾𝐈, Secretary ISOT, and Dr. Pratik Das, Organizing Secretary ISOT, to please join us on the stage. Requesting Dr. 𝐿𝐼𝐜𝐜𝐾𝐈, sir, to please do the honors.